All right. Hello, Julie, and hello, everyone who's logging in here today for one of our occasional interviews. Excuse me one second. Let me turn off the secondary audio. There we go. Welcome to one of our occasional interviews and discussions exploring feminine power and leadership. And I'm so happy to have Julie Winkle Giulioni here with me to celebrate her new book on International Women's Day 2022 at the beginning of Women's History Month. And even though this book is not about women specifically, promotions are so yesterday, career development to help employees thrive, I think the themes really connect with women. And so I'm just really excited to have this conversation with you today. So, and congratulations, today is the launch of the book itself.
It is. Thank you, Dana. Yeah, it's a really auspicious day to be launching a book, huh?
Yeah, it is. Did you pick it on purpose?
No, I was kind of hoping for 2/22/22. I thought February 22nd would be a kind of cool day, but I think I won the lottery getting today instead.
Good. I would agree. I have to say, despite the fact that words are my life, I don't actually read that many books. And I don't read a lot of business books because it's less fun than, reading other kinds of books. I really enjoyed your book, and I have already started recommending it to people because it is eminently readable, but also incredibly practical on topics that I read a lot about. I found a lot of new ideas in there about engaging employees and just being a good manager of people. And I'm wondering what inspired you to write this book as a follow-on to your first book, which was on a similar topic. What was the problem you were trying to solve with Promotions Or So Yesterday? And what an intriguing title.
Yeah, isn't it a great title? I can take no credit for it. My publicist, Fazia Burke, came up with it just off the top of her head, and we thought, we got this. The first book, Help Them Grow or Watch Them Go, that I had the good fortune to write about 10 years ago with Beverly Kay, was all about the career conversation. And it was really about trying to unburden it a little bit, make it easier for managers and supervisors, create a different kind of cadence, so that folks could have sort of an ongoing thread of development conversation over time, rather than those one and done, sit down for 2 hours, plot out your career, and then forget about it until next year this time. And so I think we were really successful in helping managers think about the conversation differently and give them some tools, some questions that would really enrich the conversation. And so since that time, I've done, tons of training and keynotes and that kind of thing around that book. And managers were incredibly appreciative. And yet they still were saying, but then what do I do? I'm having a better conversation. It's happening more frequently. It feels really authentic. We're going to deeper places. But where do I take it? Because if people want that promotion, I don't have a lot of that to give. And so even though I can have this conversation, I'm still tentative about it because where it's going to go is only going to disappoint. And I heard that so much, that there was still such trepidation because of the assumption that we all want a promotion. At the same time, as I'm talking to people, real people day in and day out about what career means to them and how they want to grow, the story was really different. It didn't square with those expectations. And so I really felt compelled to look at, is there a different way for us to think about, look at, be with career development that takes us from this one-dimensional, climb up that corporate ladder, or even the two-dimensional, climbing around a wall or a jungle gym or lattice? Is there a way to look at this that is less structural and more human, that really speaks to what people want out of their work and how they want to grow? And so that was really the impetus for Promotions Or So Yesterday.
Well, there were two statistics that you had in the kind of opening to the book. that really caught my eye that I think relate to this, and I'm wondering if you can speak to them. One was from your own research that which the book is based on. I hope you'll explore more with me in this conversation. But the one that really caught my eye was that 69% of the people you surveyed, managers and employees, I take it, thought that it was actually the manager's job to help their employees with career development, which I wish when I was a manager, people had told me that. I had no idea it was supposed to be my job. And so I thought that was really notable, but even more notable was a LinkedIn statistic that 94% of people said they would be inclined to stay at their jobs longer if they got some career development help from their managers and their companies. And those two statistics really blew my mind as a kind of a mind shift from how we think about our job as leaders and managers. And I'm wondering if you see connections between that desire, like you're talking about, that there's a need out there for people to have help with their career development. How is that connected to the Great Resignation or the Great Job Hop, as what we're seeing in the workplace today? What do you think those dynamics really say?
Yeah. Well, and there's one more statistic that even sets the table more fully. I think it's Right Management has found that 91% of us in the US would say that career development is important or very important to us. So career development's a big deal. It's not a side dish on the menu. It is really significant to people and something that is front and center. So it was actually a couple of years ago, a study that I had done to try to tease out the gender differences relative to some career development matters. And the upshot was there were far more similarities than differences in the data. So I didn't play out the hypotheses the way I wanted. But that 69% number was really significant because what we saw was across generations, employees believe, in their heart of hearts that they should expect that their managers see this as part of their job, a significant dimension of the value that they bring as managers. And so it is interesting because we go back and forth. The pendulum swings between, is it the manager's job? Do the employees have to own it? And the truth is somewhere in the middle. It's really a partnership. But the fact that employees believe it to be a fundamental job responsibility means they have expectations around the kind of behavior that their managers are going to be demonstrating. And when they don't see that, it looks like poor management, poor leadership, not doing your job properly. And then that LinkedIn statistic, 94% would stay longer if they felt like you were making an investment in them. There was another more recent statistic. People who feel like they don't see growth opportunities are 7.9 times more likely to leave, even if they like their job. So even if they're happy with the role that they're in, even if they like what they're doing, if they don't see the opportunity for growth, they're considerably more likely than others to leave. So the Great Resignation, reevaluation, reshuffle, job hop, whatever we want to call, this quandary that we're in right now, it's fueled by a whole lot of things, but development or the lack thereof is certainly one of the factors. People are making choices to leave where they are for opportunities where they see more potential for development.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I think you're right that people who have a manager who is not engaged with them as career professionals that are going somewhere, they feel like that cog in the wheel, like, oh, I'm only good to you as long as I do this job description. And by the way, this job description isn't evolving and growing the way I am. So I get to this point where I've outgrown this job description. And if you're not going to engage with me to expand the job or expand me or help me move on, then I have to do it for myself. And what's interesting, I observe just in the last 5 years, people used to sort of fight that. And today they're like, nope, I'm out of here. So to your point about, 7.9% more likely to go, I think employees are understanding, oh, this is on me. And I'm empowered to do something about it. So maybe maybe that's part of what we're seeing together.
I think it's right. And you know what's interesting about that is I feel like some of the younger entrants to the workforce have given all of us permission to go there. You know, I think I was raised during a time where you had to stay somewhere a certain length of time. I mean, they're invested in you, you got to invest back. And, you know, I think newer entrants to the workforce have empowered the whole workplace to kind of say, yeah, okay, my needs aren't being met here, and I don't need to stay if it's not a reciprocal, you know, mutually beneficial relationship.
Right. And then you have coaches like me saying, yeah, move on. Well, let's go back to the point you brought up about, you know, it's about more than climbing the ladder. As a manager, a lot of the things that you think you can do is say, well, let me tell you how to get ahead. And I will never forget one call I had with a group of women, professional women. And I sort of said, I made that assumption. I just said, well, you know, we're all trying to get ahead or something. And someone came on and said, well, what if we don't want to get ahead? You know, like what if it's not our dream to be CEO someday? How can you help me or something? And I just remember stammering and thinking, oh, I should know the answer to this question. But to your point, I think a lot of people get in their head that that's all anybody wants is to get ahead. And in fact, as you go up the pyramid, there are just fewer slots. And really, not everybody does want to be in one of those slots. So tell us more about your model and the elements in it, because there's a few of them I really want to dive into, but it's so interesting to me that you have identified 8 elements, only one of which is climbing the ladder.
Yeah.
So what can you know, give us a picture of all those other conversations we can be having with our employees.
So just before I do that, I just want to amplify your point about not everybody is interested. We make this assumption, but we're making the assumption because we only have one mental model about what that development looks like, what career development looks like. But you've got people who love what they're doing, who want to do what they're doing, who are good at what they're doing. They don't want to go anywhere. They don't want to have to pack up and move or take on a new role or whatever, but that's not the same as not wanting to grow. And so what happens is, I think in the past, managers have looked at the climbers and the folks who just want to stay stuck. And there's a little bit of a judgment going on, you know, when we do that. When the truth is, the whole population is looking to grow. And the manager's job is to figure out what that looks like for each individual. So the way I kind of think about it, and I'm no artist, and so as I paint this picture, it'll be probably a little clunky, but the way I think about it is career development is like a light that we have to date only been shining on the corporate org chart. And so it has illuminated all of the one-dimensional options, you know, where we can climb up that corporate ladder, which we know is rickety, gets narrower and whatnot, but that's one option. Or, you know, lateral and popping around and doing that. But all we've seen so far is this two-dimensional view of what's possible. And so in the book, the centerpiece of the book is the multidimensional career framework. And I'm seeing it almost as a prism, that this light of career development goes through, and just like a prism, you know, it refracts and it bends and it breaks things. And out on the other end, you see discrete, and you can see these discrete elements of, you know, the rainbow of light, that spectrum of light, whatever it is. I'm no scientist nor an artist. But you take what was invisible and then you break it out, and suddenly you can see it. And once you can see it, you can label it, you can start wrapping your head around it, wrapping your arms around it, and working with employees around it. And so that rainbow of colors on the other end of the prism, to me, really represents the other dimensions of development that haven't been on our, many of which haven't been on our radar screen to date. So would it make sense for me to just quickly go through what they are? Okay, so a couple of them are probably no-brainers, and we normally think about some dimension of that relative to career development. So one of the dimensions is competence, wanting to increase our skills and abilities to be more effective in our current role, but also to prepare for whatever the future might bring. And I think we all know it's just increasingly uncertain. So competence and the learning and the development associated with that is one. Another one is challenge. And a lot of managers and leaders use challenge well and strategically as a vehicle for helping to stretch people beyond what's known, to put them into that discomfort zone. And that's really where learning is amplified. There's a dimension of connection. And we've all heard the expression, it's not what you know, it's who you know. And I think that's way overstated, but we learn through and from others. And so building a network, relationships, community, visibility all play into career development. So those are kind of already in the back of our mind. That's not sort of new thinking relative to helping people grow. But there are some dimensions that managers haven't necessarily associated with career development in the past. The first is contribution. Human beings have this innate need to make a difference, to step up, to be of value, and to live, on purpose. And when we're intentional about that, it can be an incredible source of development. When we're willing to step up and give more of ourselves, and we do that strategically, we can grow skills, networks, competencies, whatever it might be, that's part of the development that I can acquire. So that's one. We've got confidence. And I know you're going to be anxious to talk a little bit about that, because that's a biggie as well, and not something we normally think about relative to career development. But lack of confidence is a career killer. And we all have it, most of us experience it at some point in our lives. And there are times when really doubling down and making sure that you've got complete trust in your abilities and your talents and your capacity to show up and deliver on a consistent basis. I mean, that's hugely developmental. There's the dimension of contentment, which makes some managers and leaders kind of squirm. But contentment isn't the same as complacency. Contentment acknowledges that we've got a long runway when it comes to our working lives. We're talking decades, and we got to treat it like a marathon and not a sprint. And so there are times in our lives when the best step forward is that step back to cultivate ease and joy and balance and meaning in our lives so that we can sustain ourselves for the long haul. And then there's choice, another one that makes managers squirm sometimes, because it feels like a zero-sum game. If they've got control, then I don't. And that's not what it's all about. But autonomy is a fundamental psychological need that we all bring to the workplace. And the last couple of years, and now as we return to work, this notion of flexibility, having, authority over when, where, how I work is becoming increasingly important. Amplified decision-making is a huge way to grow and learn as you have to expand your purview, your understanding, implications of things. And then finally, the 8th C is climb. That is one of the 8 dimensions. The problem with climb is managers and employees, they have pitifully little control over that. Whereas with all of the other C's, those are squarely within their locus of control, their sphere of influence. They can choose, managers and employees can choose to co-create experiences that drive those dimensions. And so it's really kind of empowering. It creates almost a no excuse zone for managers and employees alike, because you've got anytime, anywhere development that's right within your control.
Well, and you mentioned the zero-sum game mindset that a lot of people have about the workplace. Either I'm moving up or I'm moving out. I get the promotion or I don't. I win or I lose. And what I love most about your model here is that it's not a zero-sum game at all. It's instead of being sort of competitive winners and losers, it's more cooperative, collegial, abundant. There are many opportunities to succeed. But you also mentioned that some managers squirm a bit and find aspects of this uncomfortable. And I can imagine getting some pushback that this is too soft and squishy, and I don't want to get, sucked into people's own personal dramas and stuff. So I'm wondering what is the appropriate role of competition, try and the climb and getting ahead. And when is it too squishy? Like, where's the butter zone? Where's that good place where, you're not too squishy, but you're also not too hard?
Yeah. Gosh, we could talk about this for a long time. So just going back to something that you said leading up to that, the idea of I don't want to get drawn into somebody's personal drama, and that's obviously not a manager's role, but the idea that you've got a work person and a home person, if we've learned nothing else over the last 2 years, it feels like we've got that we're a whole person, who's coming to the workplace or having the workplace come to them. So this idea of, leave your personal life at home, I just don't think the genie's out of the bottle on that. We're not going back there. So managers who refuse to engage with people as whole humans are going to find themselves at a disadvantage, because employees are ready to be whole humans now in the workplace. They've had their dogs and kids on their laps. They've been trying to cook up the spaghetti while handling the conference call. They totally get that. And so from a manager's perspective, it really is time to maybe take off the blinders and think about your people in whole people, sorts of terms. And so naturally, when you do that, things get a little less, clear. The lines get a little bit blurry. Things can be a bit more subjective, than in the workplace. It's kind of comforting, even if you're not able to give promotions, it's kind of comforting to have people on a path and be able to check the box that, I have so many people who are ready to move to this level or whatever it might be. But those are totally meaningful metrics. I mean, they might be really hard numbers, but they don't mean anything, because those are people who are sitting in a waiting room getting ticked off and getting ready to put their resumes out on the street. So I think the challenge is for leaders to, step into the mushiness a little bit and realize that some of the harder stuff that they were dealing with, the harder data and that sort of thing, were just lagging indicators that really didn't tell as much. And maybe it's time for us to find some new indicators. And I don't know that they're numeric, and I don't know that they're metrics, but some new ways of really taking a temperature reading of your folks to see where they stand in terms of the investment they feel that's being made in their development. When we think about competition, and the climb up the corporate ladder just epitomizes that, doesn't it? And it is a zero-sum game. And if I'm competing with you, Dana, for that one slot that's up, and he's not even going to leave for the next 10 years, I mean, what's in it for me to support you in your development? It takes a real abundant thinker to be able to get out of oneself to help you possibly overtake me. What the framework in the book, the multidimensional framework, I think sets out is a game where everybody, it's kind of a create your own adventure, where we're playing the games that are most interesting to us, and we're playing those games with us rather than against others. And so as a result, a manager may have a team with some folks who want to climb, and there might be some little jockeying and whatever those dynamics are there, but they may have many other people who are looking for greater connection, who want to contribute, who are looking for more autonomy and choice. And if a leader is willing to get into that mushy zone of getting to know people, getting to understand what motivates them, and co-creating a plan that moves them in that direction, then they've got a whole team of winners rather than a whole team of competitors.
Yeah, and as you're talking, I'm thinking too that the underlying theme that I'm hearing in all of this, and that I, see in my own work, is that people do want to move up in some way that's meaningful to them, which can include moving, becoming more fully capable, competent, et cetera. But a lot of what they want from their managers is to truly feel valued. And which kind of leads to that contribution point, right? That like, I need to know I'm making a difference. And if you ignore me in the day-to-day, or if you ignore me as a whole person, that's communicating to me that I really don't have that much value. And that these dimensions that you're outlining that managers can engage people on are 8 different ways of helping people feel valued.
Yeah.
And telling them, I do care about you. Now, my experience also is there's salary bookmarks around that. Like if you're getting paid too little, it doesn't matter how much my manager tells me I'm amazing, I don't feel valued. And so it strikes me that title and salary and other kinds of indicators of value, most people I know and that I work with, they're not motivated by that first and foremost, but they can be demotivated by those things if they're not, if the salary and the title and the other accoutrement of recognition don't kind of comport with what the manager is saying about your value. So it does strike me that those things go hand in hand. I don't know, did that come up in your research at all?
We didn't dig into that in particular, but you're absolutely spot on. The other C, all of my dimensions start with C. The other C that's not on there is compensation. And it's a reality. I know there's some research. I don't know if it's been updated recently. When it was originally done, it was like 75,000 was the number. Over that, more money doesn't make you happier. I think with inflation, it's probably higher, but there's some threshold over which the extra doesn't add to the happiness level. But compensation, is an issue, and there are people far smarter than I looking at it. I know a lot of my clients are really starting to get creative about how can we decouple the compensation entirely from the promotion and the role. And it probably will never happen, but I do think that there are creative ways that folks are looking at, paying for outcomes. We've got technical tracks in addition to managerial tracks. So technical people don't have to become managers to get those pops. Some really creative things in terms of short-term and long-term incentives. But even so, I think it's worth noting that as part of this great, what did you call it? It wasn't hopscotch, the great resignation.
Job hop?
Job hop,
Job
yeah.
hop.
Although hopscotch sounds kind of fun too.
It does.
As part of the great hopscotch, we're seeing people walk away from the pay and the perks and move toward the purpose. We're seeing people actually make the choice that the compensation isn't as important to me as being able to make a contribution or live on purpose. And so, so it's such an individual sort of motivating factor that needs to be considered. But back to your premise, you're absolutely right. We demonstrate investment in people in a variety of ways. One of the investments is, the compensation. Oh, the other thing about comp is organizations are getting so creative in terms of total comp packages. So it's not just the dollars, but there's the vacation and, the dog sitters and the healthcare and, all of the other things that create the support system that enables someone to live the lives that they want. And so that's kind of important too. There are a lot of levers to be adjusted there. But back to the investment. One way we demonstrate investment is through those sorts of compensation things. But the other way we invest in people, and the way that probably speaks to their souls even more, is when we invest time and attention in them. And managers who take and employees know that managers are busy. They know that a manager's time is a rare and precious resource. And when those minutes and hours are dedicated to them, it speaks volumes. When a manager is willing to sit down and spend some time getting to know someone, unpacking what's interesting and motivating to them, rolling their sleeves up and figuring out together, how can we make that happen for you? People feel completely seen and they feel valued. And I would venture to guess that an employee who has that experience would be hard pressed to take a job with another manager for a few more dollars.
I totally agree with that. And I think to that point, I can't tell you how many of my clients over the years have said something like, well, I love my work and I'm having some interesting opportunities, but I'm not being paid fairly. But my manager is going to bat for me. I know that my supervisor is requesting that I get either a promotion or an increase in salary or something like that. And so I'm going to stick around. And so to your point about, an employee's willingness to stay engaged, if the company isn't necessarily recognizing them, but the manager is, it definitely makes a difference. And versus, the company can say, we love you, and the manager treats you like, crap. And guess what? You're out of there. So you're to your point about the manager being able to really make that connection better than anybody else, I think is really important. I want to dive into confidence because when I first read the book or even before I read the book and I saw your model and I saw confidence on there, I thought, okay, that's new. Confidence as a career development track. Confidence is definitely a part of the career development conversation and the personal brand conversation, but I'd never seen it really put in this context. And I just loved everything you said in that chapter. And I wanted you to explore a couple of things specifically. And a lot of this is because it is particularly important to women, but not only to women. And you bring out issues about the imposter syndrome and the connection between authenticity and confidence and perfectionism. These are themes we know are very important to women and that women often struggle with. But something you put in there was some research about age differences and differences in confidence levels depending on the age. And I'm wondering if you thought that, the women's interest in developing their confidence is a reflection of the fact that they have a confidence deficit as compared to men. Or is there something else going on, particularly in this age distinction? How do you unpack gender, age, and confidence in terms of the career development opportunity that confidence represents?
Yeah. Well, and thank you for spending some time on this chapter. I think this one is my favorite in the book because it's really personal. I think I was writing to myself. Confidence has been an issue I've grappled with my whole career. And there have been some times when it's been tougher than others to kind of get through and feel like I was a legitimate, member of the whatever it was. And so I loved the opportunity to really dig in and think about confidence in the context of career development. So you mentioned the imposter syndrome. 70%, and this goes across men and women, 70% of us are going to experience that at some point in our careers, which is fascinating.
I think it's higher personally.
You? Maybe.
I do.
Or I'm on the heavy user end of the spectrum. We've got others on the other end. But it's debilitating. It really is the energy that it takes to fake it and to try to come off as something one is not in confidence. It really takes an emotional toll. And so I really was anxious to get to the bottom of that. The research that you're referencing is from Zenger Folkman and Jack Zenger and Joe Folkman, who are just brilliant in the leadership space. And what they found was with women, I want to just make sure that I get this right. So they saw the greatest gap in confidence between men and women under 25. And so it's interesting because, you read about the value of maybe same-sex education for women going through college. You read about how girls can sometimes get shut down in school, might lose confidence around math and science sorts of topics because of the dynamics at play in the traditional educational system. So under 25, we have the biggest gap. Then at around 40, confidence is the same between men and women. And then when you get to over 60, women's confidence is greater than men's. So the delta goes from less than to more than as women age. And I have to say, just personally, being on my own aging journey, that resonates for me. I do feel more confident today than I did 10 years ago or 20 years ago. So for me, that feels right. What about for you?
Well, it definitely feels right. Personally, what's fascinating to me, and I read this, but I didn't put it together till you just made that motion with your hands, that that is the exact opposite of the pay gap. Because the pay gap is very narrow to non-existent in early career, and it expands till later in the career. The later you are in your career, the wider the pay gap on average.
Yeah.
And maybe confidence is necessary to deal with the pay gap. I don't really know.
Could be.
but it also, yeah, I don't know what causality is there. I don't want to make up a story for it, but it's absolutely fascinating.
It deserves a reflection for sure.
Yeah, but I think it speaks to, going back to the research itself, it speaks to the importance of experience, and in building our confidence. And this is something that I believe is true for everybody, which is we become confident at things we have done multiple times so that we kind of know how it works, right? And the more we know how it works, the more we can have confidence. And confidence doesn't mean I'm always going to, knock it out of the park. It means sometimes it's like, I'm not going to swing at that. I know I'm not going to do well at that, but I know when I choose to swing, I'm going to knock it out of the park, so it's.
Or the other side of it is that's a real fastball and I'm not sure I can hit it, but I'm going to try because I know I can pick myself up.
Right.
And take another swing at it. So it's that whole spectrum from I've got this, I've got these skills in my bones. I could do this in my sleep to I'm okay with failing. That's not the end of the world.
And in both those scenarios, confidence speaks more to, knowing what I'm getting into, which is really fascinating. Coming back to career development and motivation and engagement, I take it that you see confidence as, I'm going to paraphrase it the way I take it overall. You correct me if I'm wrong, that if I'm a manager and I have the opportunity to help one of my team become more confident in their work, to grow, to become capable of doing more than they could before, then that's an investment that means something to them, not just in their competence, but in their emotional feelings about themselves. And so if I can help them become more confident, I, the manager, the company, get a benefit out of that, which is these people think better of me. They want to stay engaged because I'm helping them grow into a more confident person and professional. Is that the right way to read?
Oh, really well said. I don't think I said anything nearly as eloquent, but no, you're right. Supporting someone in becoming more confident is profound. I mean, you talk about mushy, if we want to use that word. I mean, that really goes down deep with people, and the confidence that I build in the workplace I don't leave that at the workplace. I get to carry that everywhere I go. So you're right. A manager who, and I guess the key is for when the employee is looking to develop via confidence, a manager who's willing to support that has the potential to build unbeatable loyalty on the part of that employee and change a life, and really contribute to the quality of someone's life. And most managers, most leaders, that's why they're taking on the job. They want to make a difference.
Yeah, well said. And something you said in there I didn't want to pass it up in case people don't read the book, is some of the best advice I've ever seen, which is swap shame for safety. So if you are with someone who's not feeling confident and you're trying to help them, take the shame out of it and make them feel safe so that they can explore. Going back to that whole, can I be confident enough to maybe fail? And as a manager, if we can create a space for people to fail and pick themselves back up with support and then try it and get it right, that's just an invaluable gift. And too many managers think their job is just to tell you all the things you're doing wrong and not create that safe space for you to succeed and become confident in that space. The last thing I want you to really talk about on this confidence thing, even though obviously we could talk for a long time, is your 4 roles to helping others achieve confidence. So there's 4 ways we can interact with people in a way that helps them become more confident.
Yes, and I will just go to that page in the book. It just happens to be page 72. Yeah, so helping people, and the book is filled with specific strategies for working with employees around each of the dimensions. But when it comes to confidence, when I reflect upon my own experience and the people who have been most, instrumental in helping me develop higher levels of confidence, I really recognized 4 distinct roles that were played. So the first is just what I refer to as the confidence whisperer, the person who creates that safe space that you were talking about, who trades the shame, who makes it not embarrassing to be real and vulnerable and talk about it and get it out on the table. Because I don't know about you, but I had periods where I just felt like I had to hide it. It was embarrassing to not have confidence. And so I was faking it till hopefully it would come back. And being able to, say, oh my gosh, I don't think I can do this. I'm really going to tank, and have someone who's not trying to fix it for me, but who's letting me process those feelings, just getting them out on the table. Oh, it's liberating to be able to speak those words. So there's the confidence whisperer, there's a truth teller, and everybody needs someone who will absolutely just tell them the truth. The person that you can go to, who no matter what, they care about you enough to tell you you bombed. And I know for myself, I've been just blessed to be surrounded with really nice people in my life. It's rare, that I end up, I've worked with a jerk. And so I'm always kind of worried that I'm really acting like an idiot and totally screwing things up, and people are just too nice to say anything to me. I have this going on in my head, all the time. So having a truth teller, the person who will smack you upside the head and say, okay, that was pretty bad. And, here's where it fell short. But that person who is going to just give it to you straight is important. And then there's the practice partner, because so frequently for myself and a lot of the managers and employees I know, the confidence, as you said, it comes from doing something, trying it, having a couple of cycles with it, and feeling like, okay, this is familiar. And so sometimes it's as easy as sitting with someone saying, let's role play it. What's it going to look like? Or run it through with me and I'll give you some feedback. Just that dry run dress rehearsal sort of time. And it goes back to what you were saying earlier. It demonstrates a really profound investment when we're willing to sit with people in that way. And then finally, the cheerleader, the one who bolsters you up, who reminds you of how good you are, who can point out those really specific, great things that you're doing, that it's not just the attaboy, good job, but man, when you said this, it really was obvious that the audience was listening, sort of details. Having somebody who plays that role along with the other 3, and it can be the same person, it's just, putting on different hats at different times. Those 4 roles are really what can help lift someone's confidence and get them to that place of feeling like, I got this.
I love that. I want to say something about the truth teller, because going back to my point that a lot of managers kind of think their job is to just tell you all the things that are wrong and tear you down. The truth teller is the most powerful when they're telling you the truth and reserving judgment. It's like, this doesn't mean you're terrible, but it didn't work.
Yeah.
And there's something about that safe space judgment that really makes a difference.
Well said.
One other thing I'd like to dive into in the last few minutes that we have here is choice, which, like confidence, I read that and I'm like, well, of course it's important. I never thought of it as a career development strategy. What a brilliant way to think about it. And there's so much in there. Choice, autonomy is clearly part of motivation, and Daniel Pink kind of elevated it, I think, originally as a motivating force. But you pointed out something I had never seen in there. There's some research around people's interest in power and the desire for power really being a desire for autonomy. Yeah. Which I thought was brilliant. And I'm dying to know more about this research because I think that's true. And in today's verbiage, autonomy also goes to flexibility, right? Just the flexibility over our life and, the ability to deal with our kids and our dogs and things like that, and much more. But I'm wondering if you can share more about this research, and in particular, if people's desire for power is related to autonomy, what is it a manager can do without giving up the control that they own as the manager, as the leader, because there is a tension there between the employee's ability to be in charge and the manager's ability to be in charge. So how do you unpack that as advice to managers?
Yeah. So the study, I loved it too. And it came out of the UK. And the bottom line was, when they got down under the covers, that many of the people who were aspiring to that next step into leadership were actually looking for more control, not over others, but over their own lives. And so first of all, what a fallacy. I mean, anyone who's moved up the food chain knows you have less control the further you go. So it's not like you're going to be getting that greater flexibility or whatever it might be. But it is really fascinating that it's a cry for, a desire for more of, control, flexibility, whatever it might be around my own life. And so, as I mentioned earlier on, some leaders can get a little uncomfortable around the idea of control, and understandably, there are rules, there are processes that need to be followed. So we're not talking about just throw it all up in the air and let people do whatever they want to do. But the truth is, there are a lot more dimensions of work that could be shifted in terms of control to an employee. And that in so doing, as you shift some of that choice and control, you also are helping them grow, because as they're taking on greater decision making or more control of a process or a system or something, they're going to have to learn. They're going to have to understand the bigger picture. They may have to develop new skills in order to execute on that. So the key is, where can you and the employee find that space that doesn't compromise mission critical outcomes, but gives them the opportunity for some expanded choice. And in the book, we just have a starter list there of choice points to consider. Things around tasks and priorities. Location, of course, is big. Schedule and timing. The conditions, could they work independently or maybe with others? That's an element of choice. The approach that they take, the sequencing, the technology that they use, the boundaries, the learning opportunities. So when you and the employee sit down, there are probably nooks and crannies where the employee could take on some more control, authority, responsibility, decision-making that could actually unburden the manager even to be able to do more of what they want to do. I guess the other thing that's important to mention too is a lot of employees have more of that kind of choice in some cases than they realize. And it's sort of like oxygen. You don't recognize it, it's just, it's there. And so in some cases, it becomes necessary for the manager to help the employee, not in a, oh, look at how good you've got it sort of way, but in a collaborative way, identify what choices, what control, what authority, what responsibilities do you already have that maybe you aren't optimizing. And if you were to lean into that, where would the growth be for you?
Yeah, I'm really glad you brought up the choice point list, because that's a perfect example of what I said earlier. Like this book is just full of tools and checklists and matrices and ways of thinking about these things that as a leader, as a manager, would prompt you with to have all kinds of interesting conversations. And I think the other side of that is a lot of leaders, myself included, we tend to think people think like we do, right? And like, oh, well, what is it that's going to what choices do they want? Well, often they want choices that are different than yours. And the only way to find that out is to talk to them about it and listen. And that list you just read through is like, you can give it to somebody and say, what do you care about on here? And they're very likely to come out with something that you, the manager, didn't even consider.
I know. And that's the bottom line, is with these dimensions, with career development, with engaging employees, it is a one size does not fit all. And one size doesn't even fit the same person over time. We've got to be willing to adjust these dimensions. I might be really interested in confidence right now, but I get that nailed and I'm ready to move on and do, something more in the contentment realm or challenge or whatever it might be. I wrote an article recently and likened career development to bespoke cocktails. The whole bespoke idea, just for me, crafted with my preferences, how I'm feeling, what I want at any given time. And I think we, as managers, could come up with some career cocktails if we thought about this a little bit in a more bespoke way.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned that, because I wanted to kind of close out on that concept, which is actually, when you were generous enough to join our women's mastermind last month, we went into some conversations, and part of what came out of it was some people were not saying that contribution was most important to them. And I thought that was strange, because I know these people, I know contribution is hugely important to them. But when we dug under it, it turned out, well, they kind of felt like they had the opportunity to contribute where they were. So that wasn't their top priority. Their priority went to the thing they didn't have. So either choice or I forget what it was, climb was there for some, but so people can feel satisfied on some of these dimensions that leads them to really lean into one of the other ones. And that as a manager, as an employee, it's kind of our job collectively to figure out what is that cocktail, what is that's important to them now. And you had a quote in your book I really liked: position the dimensions as means to their ends, to the employee's ends. Which I think is not the way a lot of us as leaders and managers think about career development for people. And that your book and all the tools in it are kind of a good tool for helping diagnose, what is it that a particular person needs in this moment to help them develop their career in a way that's meaningful to them. So I just wanted to know if you had any final thoughts on how would you like people to use this book? How would you like people to use the wisdom in this book?
Oh, I love that. I'm glad that's recorded. I want my family to hear that. I really think the book is a call to action for managers to shift their mindset and to expand the vocabulary. We used to just have a very narrow language around career development being that promotion. And we've got a new vocabulary. So I would love to see managers start using that new vocabulary, talking with people about what interests them at any given time, de-emphasizing that, where do you see yourself in 3 to 5 years? It only serves to reinforce that climb up the corporate ladder, whether anybody wants it or not. And to your point, to how do you make that personal in the book, we have a paper-based self-assessment that you can use with employees that can help them diagnose what's most interesting and alive to them right now. We have an online version as well. But that's a great tool for being able to jumpstart the conversation. So the manager doesn't have to worry about, do I have all the right questions to get at what the interests are? The interests are right there. So you can just start the conversation that much further with, why is that the interest? What does that look like to you? And how can we work together to make it happen?
That's terrific. Well, thank you so much for your time. Congratulations on the book. This has been a wonderful conversation, and I'd love to keep it going, but we hit all the high points that I thought were the most amazing, but there are plenty of others in there. And to everybody listening, I recommend you go buy the book right now.
Thank you, Dana. It's been a pleasure.
All right. Take care, and hopefully we'll see you around in another one of these conversations.
Oh, I hope so. Thank you.
Take care.